So I've got a lot of my parts cleaned up and they're ready for reassembly. I had been waiting for my bearings to come in for the front housing. They now have arrived. I bought these from RC Bearing. And I think before I showed you about how I cleaned up the crankshaft. And I want to show you that how nice and smooth these bearings just slide right on here. That's why I use the 3200 grit emery cloth or sandpaper, and a little, maybe even I didn't use the triple or the quadruple aught steel wool on this one, but that's what that should look like. It's nice and smooth on there. The front bearing, oops, basically the same thing. Slides on pretty easily. I could probably work that down a little bit better, but that's really plenty good. And I've got a nice coating of oil on that crankshaft to help facilitate that. So one of the next videos coming up, I'll show the installation of these bearings into the housing. There's really not much to it. I'm going to go find the appropriate size socket wrench that fits right over the outer housing. I'll just put it on my workmate, take the bearing off. I'll heat the outer housing up with a heat gun, drop it on there, and then just tap it in place. Same thing's going to happen for the rear bearing. Now the rear timing gear, you can see I've got that all nice and cleaned up. I went ahead and I took the timing, the gear out again. So I want to talk about these cams and the cam lobes. You can see the lobes here. And if you look here, here's the top notch on this timing gear. That notch corresponds to this little dot, timing dot right there. These are not dots, those are just the screws, bottoms of the screws that hold this together. But that dot corresponds to the notch and they should be lined up, and of course since I didn't take this apart they never would. But the thing I want to show you is that with that notch up, I don't know if you can see it or not, those lobes are not directly pushing the push rods up. This one, if this way, it would be pushing it up, and then this way. But the point I'm making is when I put this in and time it, the diagram for the OS that's in an OS book actually shows you to put it so that this dot is at the top, and then you have your crankshaft be a top dead center, so it would be timed like this. Well, I think that's not necessarily the best way to do it, because the compression stroke should be with the push rods at the lowest point. The lowest point is going to be 180 degrees opposite of that with this dot at the bottom. So these lobes are completely down, thus your push rods are going to be at the lowest point, and that's how you want to set the timing in your engine, because obviously you don't want to be on intake or exhaust stroke when you're trying to set the timing. It's always on the compression stroke. So anyway, that's a little bit about that. The crankcase here, I actually did go through the trouble. I took this gear out. This gear is actually the part that drives, that meshes and drives in here. So I did go ahead and I popped that thing out. It wasn't that tough. And as you can see, it just drops right in. It's a real nice fit now. I cleaned it up, obviously. Very nice fit. Now the drive disc is the part that this engages in on the other side. And you can see how they're shaped. How they fit together just like that. And then they're held in place with that screw. And of course that bearing is in between them. So those are some of the things I wanted to show you about this engine, since it's all basically down to the part, as far down as I'm going to take it. I wasn't going to take this bearing out because this bearing is actually in really good shape. We'll proceed now with the reassembly.